Hello there, this is James Scrofty, 1978, and a few days ago now, having put it off for several years because I was afraid that I wouldn't like it as much as many of my friends do, I finished binge-watching every episode of Steven Universe that I can find, up to and including Room for Ruby, and having done so, I can now proudly declare that it's one of the best and certainly the most progressive animated series that I've ever seen in my life. Indeed, the fact that the characters are still dealing with the emotional and psychological pain and trauma of past events many episodes and even seasons later is a much needed and incredibly refreshing break away from the trope that everything is resolved by the end of the episode and no one ever mentions it again, meaning that this alone makes the series stand out as being worthy of praise. And when all is said and done, in fact, the only real criticism that I have of the series itself is of a single scene in the episode in which we see the community of sentient melons which Steven accidentally made in his own image, in which, having clearly shown that the baby melons, for lack of a better term, are grown in a patch just like normal melons, the fully grown melon who literally delivers the babies, for lack of a better term, to their new parents, once again, for lack of a better term, delivers one baby to a fully grown melon who is wearing a grass skirt and a flower necklace and sweeping the front yard of the hut in order to identify her, in inverted commas, as the mother. And when another fully grown melon comes out of the hut to see the new baby, he, in inverted commas, is wearing a tie to identify him, in inverted commas, as the father, once again, for lack of a better term, because while I completely understand the need for visual shorthand, especially in a scene that only lasts for a few seconds and features characters who are mute, the very fact that our culture is still so patriarchal and heteronormative that probably without even realising it, the creators of the series imposed the social construct of the nuclear family on a species in which the concepts of sexual reproduction and gender don't even exist, on the assumption that this would make everyone everywhere understand that these were the baby melon's new parents, just shows how bound we still are as a society to these social constructs, cultural norms and moral absolutes, making it another reason why aliens won't talk to us. As a matter of fact, it's doubly annoying that the creators used this visual shorthand and probably didn't even realise that they were doing so, when the entire premise of the series and of another episode in particular is that quote-unquote non-traditional families are just as capable of raising children as a married mother and father with a white picket fence and a dog. But having now essentially laid out the red carpet for the main point of this video, do I honestly have to explain this to everyone yet again? Yes, in many cases, fusion between gems is supposed to be an analogy for romantic and or sexual relationships between humans, and I genuinely applaud the episode Alone at Sea for using the aftermath of the fusion between Lapis and Jasper to introduce the audience to the struggle people often endure when escaping a toxic and abusive relationship. But leaving aside the fact that the gems are inorganic aliens who are made, to use Amethyst's term, not grown or born, and whose bodies are projections of hard light, meaning that they have no concept of sex or sexuality, gender or even family as we understand it in their society, even if they were human, as I pointed out in my Sailor Moon video, links down in the underbar, on what basis do you assume, let alone proclaim, that Pearl or Ruby and Sapphire are lesbians, when here in the real world there is an entire kaleidoscope of interacting, shifting and evolving gender identities, sexual orientations, emotional and romantic preferences, and types of relationship, simply on the grounds that you want them to be lesbians because that's a label with which you're comfortable since you understand it and it makes you feel good, demonstrating once again just how bound we all still are as a society to monosexism, assuming that everyone is either gay or straight no matter what they may claim, and that quote-unquote gay relationships are exactly the same as straight relationships, right down to one person being the man and the other person being the woman. As a matter of fact, that brings me on to the question of why does Sapphire and Ruby being in a relationship in human terms because they're romantically in love with one another and fuse to form Garnet, prevent Garnet, who is by all accounts an independent sentient being, from forming a relationship with anyone else regardless of whether they're human or gem? And the answer is because of toxic monogamy culture. Full stop. Another social norm and moral absolute in our oh-so-advanced and progressive civilization, which, as before, the creators probably reinforced without even realising that they were doing so, and that causes those few alien civilizations that do consider contact with us to lament.
Surely we should tell them the secret to time travel at least.
No, I thought they were ready, but they're not.
So for the second time in 2 videos, I am calling upon everyone, including myself, to please open our minds even just a little wider, and when we see 2 or 3 or 7 women or femme-presenting individuals who are emotionally connected, romantically involved, and or sexually attracted to one another, regardless of whether they're real or fictional, to consider at least 1 or 2 of the countless other possibilities instead of automatically assuming that they're lesbians, because regardless of whether it turns out that they are actually lesbians or not, to always assume that they are keeps our mindset and thus our society as a whole perpetually trapped in the moral absolute of either gay or straight, simply because it's easier and more comfortable. And finally, speaking of reasons why aliens won't talk to us, the name of the gemstone and thus of the character in Steven Universe is Peridot. Peridot. Say it with me, children. Peridot. If I hear the name pronounced as Peridot one more time, then I'm going to start taking hostages, because honestly, it's Harry Potter and his knuts all over again.
Problem number 1, right out of the gate, they pronounce what is clearly supposed to be a silent K in knuts. Are you kidding me? Did nobody know what they were doing? Screw a wallet, you need like a whole knapsack. And that can't be good for your knees.